it's kind of complicated. How would you characterize China's economic recovery? And what's happening there?
Well, it's difficult to see that the momentum for growth in the post-COVID recovery has eased off considerably in the second quarter. And even more unfortunate that most of that slowdown is showing up in retail sales and the domestic consumption of services, which is where the policymakers had hoped China's recovery would be based. And it seems like the headwinds are coming from long-standing vulnerabilities in terms of the property market being the major source of wealth for the middle class, and the fact that their children, the youth unemployment, is so high at 21%. So these are the kind of things that I think the policymakers are going to have to address very quickly in order to get China back on track again.
I want to ask you about the young people in just a moment, but Chinese are spending some money, but it's mostly traveling at the moment. They're just not spending in other areas. Do you think we can expect some kind of government intervention or stimulus?
Well, a lot of the travel represents money that was saved during the COVID, and people just had to get out and just leave home because they've been locked up for so long. But I don't think that will continue unless the families themselves feel that their wealth is preserved and also that their income is secure. And I think that's something that the government's going to have to do a lot to bolster. Going forward, I think one of the things that we need to worry about is how the reforms are going to be put in place. Fiscal policy on the part of the government is now very limited, especially at the local level.
Let's touch back to youth unemployment. That remains an issue, as you mentioned, especially with record numbers of new college graduates looking for jobs. The jobs aren't there. What needs to happen? What do you see happening here in the next year or so?
I think what China is trying to do for youth unemployment is to try to improve education and make it more useful education so that they can be leaders in the new fields of technology, like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, electric vehicle design, which are areas where China has tremendous lead over the rest of the world. And I think shifting resources to train people to be useful in those areas will be a very productive way of using every dollar that the government's going to be spending on investment.
And what is a larger impact you see on the global economy? We know that U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was just there in China last week. What are you seeing in the back half of this year? Any optimism at all?
I think the key to resolving the U.S.-China tensions will be trying to get to the basics, as Secretary Yellen said. The basics are trade agreements that preserve intellectual property rights, that allow domestic access to domestic markets, and allowing companies to find ways to do businesses without a lot of interference. And I think those are the kind of parameters that we're going to be looking forward to going forward. And also the Chinese authorities have been wanting to meet with Secretary of Commerce Raimondo to try to see how it is that the export controls might be lifted or at least adjusted to allow China access to the newer technologies in the West.
All right, William Lee, always great to get your pulse on things. Thank you so much for joining us, as always.
Thanks, Elaine.